Hi everyone, can you hear me okay? Yeah. Yes, amazing. So I apologise if you've seen me before and I sound like a broken record, but hopefully I'm still a little bit interesting. I will be happy to take any questions at the end, and hopefully you'll have some. So I just want to say thanks for having me here today, Alistair, and inviting me. It's always really exciting coming across to events and meeting people that have the same kind of passions and like-minded people that, you know, have got all the right things put in place, and they mean well and they want to learn, which is always great. So here am I. So I set up my own company a couple of years ago with the help of my mum and dad, bless them. I am an accessibility and usability consultant and keynote speaker. So I get asked a lot when I first say this, what does this entail? Why do you do it? And it always comes back to my own story, my life, and that is exactly what I'm going to start off with, talk a little bit about myself, and hopefully you'll have more of an understanding as to why I'm so passionate about accessibility, but not just accessibility inclusion, and actually more so inclusion than accessibility. I'm also Spearhead Trustee of the Molly Watt Trust, which is a family-built charity that was set up back in 2011. This is a separate kind of thing for today's presentation, but again, if you had any questions about this, I can answer those. So how open is your window? Well, one of the reasons why I designed my logo with a window in it, it's actually, that's what a website is, isn't it? It's looking through a window at information, resources, etc., etc. I look at how things can be improved, how we can design more inclusively and not exclude a certain group of people. One of the reasons why I do this is because I've been excluded before, and this is a great quote that I've used continuously, I love it, but nobody understands inclusion like those who have been excluded. So I've experienced exclusion, and I have experienced inclusion. How? So I was born deaf, so at 18 months old I was given my first pair of analog hearing aids, and I just about started speaking at the age of 6. So my life was pretty normal. I was deaf and it did have its struggles. I had lots of speech therapy, an immensely supportive family, but I was happy. I had a really happy childhood. Things were fine. I relied heavily on hearing aids and lip reading because deaf people are very visual, and I had many friends who would help me out if we were in a big group and I needed translation or someone to repeat something. Everything was good. Everything was really, really great. My childhood was amazing. Got to the age of 12 and I had a few more struggles. So it wasn't like the average 12-year-old where you started new school, big school, and you had new teachers, bigger classroom, more students in school. I actually started to feel excluded. So I was really confused. I remember it was a really confusing time. So at the age of 12, I found out I was also going blind. So I had found out I had this condition that actually is progressive. So I was born deaf, and then during adolescence came on a condition called retinitis pigmentosa, which is actually the most common form of progressive blindness. And the deafness and the RP put together is called Usher syndrome. Now with Usher syndrome, it depends on the person, how much you lose, and the rate of progression depends on the person. I was quite unlucky, so in 2 years I went from being partially sighted at 12 to severely sight impaired, which is politically correct, at the age of 14. Now Usher syndrome, you may or may not have heard of Usher syndrome, but today you have, which is good. But it's actually the most common form of congenital deaf blindness. It's actually second in number to our aging population. And whilst lots of people have not heard of it, mostly because it's an invisible disability, I could walk in anywhere and people would say to me, "You're not deafblind, you look normal," whatever that means. But it is so common. And people who have Usher syndrome don't feel like they can talk about it because there's so many misconceptions that surround deafness and blindness, especially in the world of design. So bring this back up. Nobody understands inclusion like those who have been excluded. Now, technology has been a game changer in my lifetime. It has enabled me inclusion. To start off with, of course, the hearing aids enabled me to speak, so I was able to communicate with my family and friends, and that was the very beginning of introduction to technology. So I talk about the hearing aid evolution quite a bit, mainly because I like to put perspective on actually how far tech has come in my lifetime. So I'm now 23, and my first introduction to tech was when I was 18 months old. So I started off with analog hearing aids, because that was what was available in 1994, and I hated them, absolutely hated them. Every chance I got, took them out my ears, hid them under the sofa, in the toilet, you name it, anywhere but my ears. Because of course, it was an alien thing going into my ears that I didn't want. But I soon came round to the fact that I needed these hearing aids. I think I realised as a little toddler that I wanted to play with my siblings and my friends, but I couldn't unless I could hear them and communicate with them. So I started wearing them. Then at the age of 9, and I remember this day really, really well, I was introduced to digital hearing aids, and I was actually the first child in Berkshire in education to try digital hearing aids. And it was awesome time, and I remember putting them on, and later on in the day we took our dog out to the park, and I heard leaves crunching underneath my feet. And I remember thinking, wow, what is that? I had to have my mum explain that leaves make crunching sounds when you step on them. And then when I put my jacket on, I could hear the rustling behind my ears, zip fastening, birds singing, all these new discoveries at the age of 9 through digital hearing aid technology. And I just remember being so fascinated. It's like, wow, there's so much more to life. Until now, I really didn't think it could get much better, to be honest with you. But I got to the age of 21, and I was introduced to smart hearing aid technology. Now, what is this? It enabled me more inclusion than ever, for one. But basically, it came with an app, because everything's got an app now. Why not have an app that alters your hearing? So what smart technology does now is through Bluetooth connectivity, I can now stream phone calls straight to my hearing aids. For the first time ever at 21, I made a phone call and actually could access the phone call, hear my granddad who lived 4 hours away in Liverpool. I could actually hear his voice down my hearing aids on the phone, which was just surreal. Before then, to make a phone call, I'd have my phone on loudspeaker, and it was very intrusive, and it just wasn't a phone call, it wasn't a personal conversation, because I'd often have to have someone translate what they were saying. But because of this and the direct streaming technology, I was able to actually have a conversation. And that was amazing. And along with streaming music, and also the program that comes with it, where I can alter bass, treble, volume. I can save locations on it, so if I walk into a restaurant that I often go to and I've set certain settings on, it will automatically change the next time I walk in. This is also compatible on the watch as well, so that's very handy also in itself. So if I need to make any discrete changes, I can just flip on my watch. It's quite handy. It was really handy when I was working in retail and I was bored on the shop floor and I could just turn some music on and no one would know. So all these really, really cool things through these hearing aids, and it was amazing. Great, right? But not that great. Now, what do I mean when I say how far open is your window? So I'm not asking you, is your window open? I'm asking, how far is it open? Now, exclusion happens everywhere in society, online, offline, in services and shop, and many people are unaware most of the time when it actually happens. What do people think when they're designing for accessibility? And this is what I come across. You have compliance, checklists, vision, hearing, motor, cognitive. Brilliant. Great start for a bit of education. I kind of have a bit of a pet hate for checklists, I'm not going to lie to you. But I do think it's a great start. It's a great start in terms of designing for accessibility. Now, the other mistake that many people make is that assistive technologies, which I have to say is more or less mainstream technology because there's so many built-in features now, but you have hearing aid, you have voice reading screens and things, and also braille machines as well. People assume that if you've got these things, that the design doesn't need to be compatible at all. They just assume that it's going to make it work for people with disabilities who use the tech. And that's totally wrong, because it doesn't fully compensate. What do I mean by that? Well, they provide assistance, but they don't provide solutions. I apologise for the spelling mistake there, just noticed that. So, when designing for accessibility, people do think that we're looking at minority groups, so small blind groups, deaf group, cognitive groups, motor groups. It's so unrealistic, it's so black and white, and it just doesn't meet everybody's needs. So what do I mean when I talk about designing inclusively? Realistically, we are designing for our future. Now, I know that a lot of people are talking about this now, all the presentations and tweets and things I'm seeing, and people are on this wavelength, which is really, really great. But I really like to try and make it so that it's as relatable as possible to everybody in the audience, because I can stand here and try and inspire you into designing better products, but actually I want you to think about yourself. You know, I want you to include us all in today's and tomorrow's digital society. Because think of yourself in 30, 40 years' time. You're going to be a bit older, not quite going to be as young and strapping and fit as we are now. We'll be a bit slower. Statistics say most of us will be alive, but what changes? So again, we have some long-term conditions that can happen. I talk about my granddad a lot, bless him. He's totally unaware of the fact that I talk about him a lot in these presentations, but he is just an old guy who is very much still capable, but he's got really thick glasses, he needs hearing aids, and his mobility is now restrained, and that's because he's a bit older. But the way he uses his iPad is exactly the same as how I use mine, and I'm registered deaf-blind, and he's just an older guy who's developed some accessibility needs. Ooh. But what about in the here and now? So people are also talking about this as well, which is really cool, temporary and situational impairments. So this could happen to any one of us at any time. We could be on the phone and it's really noisy, and how your hearing thing can change. You could be holding a baby, you could have a broken arm, all these things. Medication's a good one. You can be really tired, you could be hungover, which I'm sure we've all been hungover before. And just the way we behave with products is different, the way we access things is different. So before anything, I often advise, and this is what I do, I don't just do keynote presentations, but I do sit down and I talk, and I've rolled out a few workshops now. But first and foremost, I'm always talking about being aware of the grey areas. So we're not just talking about the minority groups that everyone stereotypically thinks accessibility is for. We're talking about the grey area, which I think you'll find every one of us is in this grey area. We need to think about everybody, and we need to think about inclusion. So to put into context, by the age of 40, 1 in 4 of us will need glasses. I can see a few pairs of glasses around the room. Glasses are assistive technologies, and people who are wearing assistive technologies have got accessibility needs. So therefore, why aren't more apps supporting dynamic type? Meaning, I don't know if you already know, but you can alter the size of your font, and what should happen is that apps that support this will alter the size so that it's automatically bigger for the user to see. And it makes sense, because if this person has already got large text, this is actually a screenshot of my iPad and how big I have my text. It makes sense for when I download an app that the text is the same size, because that's what I need in order to access it. But you would be amazed, more apps, more often than not, dynamic type is not enabled. It's just still tiny and it's inaccessible. And that's not just inaccessible to people like me, that's people who wear glasses. People, if you've forgotten your glasses and you go to the office, how do you access your emails or app or anything? So designing inclusively will not only benefit the minorities, but it will benefit the majority, as in all of us. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Can I just break my mic? Do we have any questions?
Silence.
Should I get the laptop right?
Cool, thank you.
Hands up if you have a question. Somebody must have a question. In the front.
Hi. So my question is about the last kind of slide that you showed, Apple's dynamic type stuff, and we've been looking at it quite a lot. And one of the things that came up recently when we were talking about it was kind of the way that Apple handles it, and that's kind of, I guess, the gold standard at the moment, the way that they do it in their own applications. And one of the things that I kind of noticed, and we were talking about, and we didn't really know what the answer to this question was around the titles. So they don't actually scale up. Does that like inhibit you in any way, or do you not really mind?
Sorry, just try. Can I scroll back up? Sorry, I have this text really large, so there's not a lot of text on the screen right now. I'm just going to go through that again. Right. Can't go up. No. Okay. So the question being, I got the first part about Apple and how they. This laptop falling. Oh, guys. Sorry, guys. Don't want to crash anyone's Mac.
Shall I summarise the question?
Yeah, sorry, can you summarise it?
So the question was around when you use the dynamic text in some apps, the title text doesn't get bigger?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the screen title.
A lack of consistency definitely can be a problem for a lot of people, because if someone's relying on the fact that they want larger text and not all of it has been adjusted, then that can prove to be quite difficult. But I think it's more than just adjusting text size sometimes, because it depends on the formatting of the app, and sometimes it can cross over and overlap and things. So there is more from a design perspective that needs to be considered with dynamic type. But consistency is definitely key. So assuring that all of it is, larger, as similar as possible to their own phone settings, because you want to be familiar with the app and its settings.
So can I ask, how many people increase the font size on their apps? So they got what that's about 20, so that's about 25% of the room there, I reckon. And how many people, when they build apps or websites, do you test if it will still work when the font size is bigger? Okay, good. Cool. So I think, unfortunately, a lot of people out there don't do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and what about, like on Twitter, you can change it to night mode. Does anybody use night mode? It looks so much better, I'm not going to lie, but it's actually better for everybody's eyes, having a darker background with lighter writing, just having that better contrast. It's just more relaxing. I would do anything to, get rid of any white background, which throughout websites and apps it's just mainly white, and it can cause just an instant headache. But that's why I always urge that there are options to change the colours and contrast and things, which you can of course do on iOS devices. But then again, the compatibility with the app and the default colours there can often clash, and then it's just inaccessible. So it is often about finding a way to work well with the product, as opposed to doing it your own way and just hoping that the settings work with it. But yeah.
Any other questions? Question from Bryn at the front.
Hello, Molly. Thank you very much for that. That was the first time that I've seen you speak, so yeah, eagerly anticipated and very much enjoyed. So, as a visually impaired person myself, I'm very short-sighted, and I don't really use assistive technologies in the sort of classic sense. I don't use a screen reader, for example, and I very rarely speak into my mobile phone or computer. I was sort of curious to know to hear from you what you typically use or consider assistive technologies when interacting or when using the internet. So, just to give you an example, I've got my finger on control and the mouse wheel, you know, all the time when I'm using the internet, and if I can't pinch zoom on a mobile phone, and I'm not going to be spending any time on that website, you know. So I was just wondering what kind of stuff.
Yeah,
what are critical for you, you know?
It's really, really great that you said all that, because that is often a key point that I make, that a lot of visually impaired people do not use screen readers. Now, I say that to a lot of developers, and they're in shock. They're like, what? If you're blind, how can you not use a screen reader? Am I right? Yeah, I bet no one wants us to admit that right now, but I don't use screen reader. I use sort of large text. Pinch zoom, like you say, often doesn't work. And if it doesn't, and I really need to use a website, first of all, I'll look for alternate, you know, websites that I can use that are accessible. Yeah. But then what if there wasn't that option, I would screenshot it, this is a really long-winded route, but I would screenshot it and then go into my photos, zoom in, see what it's saying, and then go back. But it is an absolute mission and not very usable doing it that way. So I use, large text. I also, so opposed to Voiceover, which is a screen reader that's built in on iOS and Mac, I use Speak Screen, which it was actually made for those with dyslexia, and it's just where you swipe 2 fingers down from the top of the screen and it reads the content from top to bottom. And the only time I do that is if there's an article or a book or something, so basically large amounts of content, and I'm just really tired and I don't want to use my eyes and zoom in. That's really useful, because in comparison to Voiceover is very navigational. It will tell you whether your screen is landscape or whether it's portrait. It will tell you where the cursor is. Everything is being talked at you. And I find it really intrusive and a bit too much, especially when I'm trying to navigate myself with a bit of vision that I do have. So I'm more likely to use zoom, so on-screen zoom, and I change between window zoom and full screen zoom, so there's 2 different settings. And again, that depends what I'm using, what I'm doing. If I'm booking a ticket, if you like, and there's lots of clutter on the screen, I'll often use window zoom to get rid of all the clutter and just focus on one area. Can I ask, do you use a computer or do you use iPads or iPhones?
I bought someone gave me a Kindle Fire once, but I couldn't see the operating system controls on it, so I never used that, and it's kind of put me off the whole, you know, iPad whatever thing. So I'm really using I have a Note 8 that I get through work, which is okay for zooming into, and I have a large monitor at work that I zoom into. But sometimes, like, I can't really work from home off my laptop, basically, you know. So
yeah,
it's too
there's
small
lots
for
of
me.
practical things that surround that. I have lots of different products that I use, and it depends what I'm doing with what I use. And of course, when I'm out and about traveling, I don't really want to take all my tech with me, so I often just rely on my phone and the built-in accessibility. But it is often being aware of what they can actually do, because a lot of people aren't aware of the settings. And
I think that was kind of the point. Yeah, I sort of feel sometimes like I fall in between the whole thing. But anyway, I'm taking up.
Yeah, no. Well, I'll come over and talk to you about. Yeah,
love to chat to you more about that. No thank you very much. Also, cheers.
Question over here.
Hi, Molly. I'm Jonathan. Thanks. Great talk. I also have retinitis pigmentosa, but I no longer can use my vision, so I do use VoiceOver. So one thing that I'd love to ask everyone in here is stop making buttons called a button, because it drives me insane.
Stop making buttons called button. Yeah, yeah. And there's so many little coding kind of hyperlinks that people attach to when you're using VoiceOver, because I do a lot of user testing and VoiceOver is often used. It's really frustrating when you have this repetitive word that keeps going on and on and on, like button, and there's no description about what the link is and what the title page is or anything. And yeah, that happens more often than not, sadly, for us VoiceOver users. But hopefully, after today, a few people have been educated.
Hi, Molly. Thanks for talking. You've given lots of examples of what goes wrong. Is there any websites that do it well, that do accessibility well and kind of meet your needs? And could you tell us?
Can I say my own?
Sure, but if you could elaborate on that.
Mind you, to be honest, I'm actually in the process of trying to update my own. But one of the reasons why I say my own is because it's got the simplicity factor. You can manually change the background, the text size, the colours, etc. So these are just basic features that anyone, when browsing the internet, will see. Basically, the first thing you see is accessibility and your options to change settings. So that is what I really love, the fact that you can go and you can see it. And there's some websites that have started adopting that. However, it's sort of down in the bottom of the screen and it's kind of hidden away, and you have to kind of scan your mouse over it in order for the screen to kind of enlarge, for it to say, oh, these are your accessibility options, da, da, da. But then actually the idea was there, but getting there was inaccessible. What I like about mine is that it is just there. When you put it in mollywatt.com, it comes up, and then you have the option to change it, and then thereafter, browse the web page. In terms of really difficult websites app, LinkedIn is terrible. It is so bad. It's really inaccessible, and obviously it's such a great platform for people like myself, business owner, who wants to network and get work, but it's just really bad, mainly because you can't pinch zoom or anything on it, and on the app there's no dynamic type enablement, and the colours are shocking. And with VoiceOver as well, when you scroll down to get to the menu and newsfeed and messaging, you have to go all the way down to the bottom of the feed before you actually get to the kind of interactional buttons. It's just not very accessible. So that's probably my bad example. There are other good examples around that in terms of apps and websites that I use daily that are really handy, but mainly because the color choices are really good and the text sizes are good, and it's just little things like that. It's not too many videos and moving clips and things like that, but ultimately it's that simplicity that's really cool.
Cool, thank you.
Got time for a couple more questions? Oh, we got Hector at the back.
Thanks, Molly. It's actually the first time I've heard you live, so it's nice to hear that. And thanks for the LinkedIn feedback. Don't worry, that team are very well aware of issues there. When people are talking about magnification and there's kind of the whole pinch zoom argument, people are really talking about web as opposed to kind of whole OS magnification. Now, partly I think that's because the world has recognized that everybody finds that useful. We all use the pinch and zoom. But how do you think we're going to get people to recognize the fact that you can magnify your entire OS and start to find those shortcuts? It's Windows Plus, by the way.
Sorry, so can that be summarized a little bit? Because I only got, sorry.
So the summary was, how do we get people to understand that you can make these changes on the operating system rather than just in the browser or on the website?
Yeah, so that is a big factor, is actually the actual awareness of what the products can actually do. And that's often, I find myself educating all kinds of people on actually what their own handheld devices are capable of doing, which is one step. But I think when we talk about design and things like that, I worry that people will kind of think that that's the full compensation, and that, you know, so long as their phones can do this, then we don't really need to worry about designing accessibly. So I think, like you say, with pinch zoom and things like that, because everybody uses it, a lot of people don't see it as an accessibility feature, they just do it. And that's one of the things that I sort of stand here and talk about when I talk about inclusion, because it's actually features that everybody uses that are actually accessibility features, but they're normalised. And that's obviously also a really good thing, because we talk about normalising accessibility. And of course, I think it should also get to a point that people are aware of all the features that mainstream tech can do, opposed to kind of the specialist technology. But it's a case of just raising awareness and talking about it.
So I think, one of the things that Microsoft does that's really nice compared to Apple is that your accessibility settings are in something called ease of use, rather than accessibility, and that kind of makes it more obvious that there are things that will help everybody in there, because most people wouldn't necessarily think, oh, I'll have a look in the accessibility settings and see if there's something that will help me.
Yeah, I think sometimes simply terminology puts people off.
Sorry, yeah. So I actually think it's more fundamental than this. So when we talk about designing websites, it puts all the pressure on the designer to create the accessibility in. But the more that we can promote inbuilt system-wide magnification and accessibility, then the design matters less, as opposed to just the magnification. You see what I'm saying? So I worry about a world where we start saying this is the responsibility of a website designer rather than this is the responsibility of an OS designer.
But there's definitely a responsibility of designers and developers to be testing their stuff to make sure that it works with the operating system. Yeah. We've got time for one last question. Oh.
Hi, Molly. It's Frank here.
Hello.
Just like to ask, how do you get around pop-up ads and especially these new full-page videos that appear on your mobile when you're reading a news feed?
Yeah, so the ones that pop up are very annoying and I hate them. The ones, so if I'm on they're more likely to happen if I'm on a laptop and I'm on a website and there's a pop-up. I get really panicky. So when it happens, one example is I was booking a plane ticket, and then I was trying to book some transportation from the airport to whatever, and then this pop-up came up and it said something about important, and then like a message, and I went to look at it and then it disappeared, and then I really panicked that I missed something and I didn't want to then proceed, because I was like, oh my god, if I got it wrong and it's really important because it's a plane ticket. And so I actually just retracted what I was doing and then said to Mum, oh Mum, can you help me with this, which totally defeats the object of me actually going online and booking myself a plane ticket. So pop-ups freak me out because I only have this kind of 5 degrees vision and the rest of it's gone. So where I'm scanning around a lot, I can kind of make out something popped up and then it disappears. By the time I've scanned down, try and find it, it's not there. And yeah, it just generates this panic that doesn't need to happen. So that's a real life experience as to what happened as a result of a pop-up. I just came out and didn't proceed. With videos and things, it's always great when they have captions on them. I know there's now a feature on iOS where you can enable captions when you go on Facebook and you don't want to be listening to the audio, but you just want to read the subtitles. And a lot of people like that because it's not intrusive. If you're at work and you're supposed to be working, but you're actually watching a video, very handy. Videos often I find easier to see on my phone screen than I do on my Mac, because of my field of vision, because it's smaller, I can fit more in on the screen. But that being said, if I was watching a video, I would only want to watch the video and not have any writing and clutter or anything around it. And of course, if there's writing within the video, it's about how accessible that text is, which isn't always accessible. So, yeah.
Sorry, I was actually referring to the video pop-up ads. So if you're scrolling down a an article in the Daily Mail.
And it's already embedded in the article.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, so if I'm reading an article and there's a video there, I would, if it's on my screen, on my phone screen, I would put it to full screen, captions on it, and that's basically it. I mean, sometimes if it's really dark, I'll up my brightness, but it's hard to really say because it depends on the video content. I sometimes look at the video and I think, no, and just scroll ahead and just keep reading. I'm actually more likely to read the content than I am to watch a video. So, yeah.
Awesome, okay, thank you very much. Put your hands together, say a huge thank you to Molly.